That's a good hammer, isn't it? You like my makeshift hammer, right? There's a joke in there somewhere. I'm just not witty enough to come up with it. Good morning. I'd like to call to order the July Interim Joint Committee on Agriculture meeting. Madam Secretary, please call the roll.
Senator Chambers Armstrong, Senator Boswell, Senator Carpenter, Senator Deneen, Senator Givens, Senator Thayer.
Here.
Senator Webb, Senator West, Senator Westerfield, Senator Wilson, Representative All, Representative Klein.
Here.
Representative Jonathan Dixon, Representative Pfister.
Here.
Representative Graham. Here. Representative Hale.
Here.
Representative Kim King.
Present.
Representative Cook.
Here.
Representative McPherson. Representative Neighbors.
Here.
Representative Pollock. Representative Pratt. Representative Reed.
Here.
Representative Stalker.
Present.
Representative Stevenson.
Here.
Representative Tate. Here. Representative Thomas.
Present.
Representative Tipton.
Here.
Senator Howell, co-chair.
Here.
And Representative Heath, co-chair.
Here.
We have a quorum.
Thank you, and thanks for everybody for being here too. Ag Committee shows up well in force. We appreciate that. I'd like to start this also by everybody stand and say the pledge. Thank you. Before we get started, any members that have guests here would like to introduce them. I'm going to take chair privilege and go first. Have Dr. Bob Jackson here with Murray State Contingency. Welcome. Appreciate you being here. Anybody else have any guests they want to introduce? With that, we have a need for a motion to approve the minutes from our last meeting. So we have a motion, second by Representative Cook. All in favor? Aye. All opposed? That carries. First up, we have discussion on implementation of 2023 regular session House Bill 9. Representative Heath, Representative Petrie. You guys want to take the chair and get rolling? Yeah, would you please? Thank you. All of you are seasoned veterans at this. Please announce yourself for the record and start however you like.
Excellent. Rebecca Hartso, Babbage co-founder for Grant Ready, Kentucky.
My name is Billy Johnson. I'm the Executive Director for Federal Grants for the Office of Department for Local Government. I'll get it right.
Jeremy Buchanan. I'm the Executive Director at the Purchase Area Development District of Mayfield, Kentucky.
And I'm Eric Ratliff, Executive Director of the Big Sandy Area Development District.
And I'm going to work from here, State Representative Richard Heath from District 2.
There's a green light.
That's right here.
Jason Petrie, House District 16.
You're a perfect backbencher.
Okay, we're ready to start. I'm going to kick this off, and let me just open by saying thank you, Chairman Howe and the members of the Ag Committee for inviting us here to talk about House Bill 9. I saw Rebecca's face. It's like the number changed on us. So the acronym for this bill is GRANT, and GRANT stands for Government Resources Accelerating Needed Transformation. So the main objective of the grant is to seize on an extraordinary opportunity to leverage Kentucky state tax dollars with significant public projects that will revitalize our rural communities. There's $3 billion at the federal level that has been authorized towards programs aimed at economic and workforce development, infrastructure, substance use disorder programs, STEM education, housing, and many, many more. If you have a copy of the bill or want to get a copy of the bill, I refer you to page 6 and 7. There's a long list of items that would possibly qualify for grant funding in the bill. So since the session ended, Chairman Petrie and I have worked with Rebecca and others in concert with the Department of Local Government, the ads, nonprofits, local governments, and others to share information and try to facilitate the implementation of the grant program. So our guests have already introduced themselves, so I won't go through that. But I would like to turn it over to Rebecca and ask her to kind of bring us up to date on how we got to this point.
Sure. Thank you again. Thank you, Mr. Chairman and members of the committee for having us here to talk about the grant program. I also want to thank everybody at the table for making the journey and their continued work, and especially to Chairman Heath and Chairman Petrie. We would not be here without their leadership. So thought I'd do a quick wrap up of sort of the impetus for House Bill 9 and the grant program. Last November, we learned through our client, Grant Ready Kentucky, that over $3 trillion in federal funding was coming down the pipeline. Infrastructure, Chairman Heath touched on it, housing, STEM education, substance use recovery programs, you name it. There's funding for it, really and truly. And a lot of it's in the form of grants. What was perhaps most compelling and interesting for Kentucky is that the federal government, through an interworking agency group, has identified 25 areas across the country that need economic revitalization due to job losses and downturns associated with the fossil fuel industry. So coal mines, coal power plants, oil and gas, all of those things. This is a map of the 25 areas you can see roughly. What's most interesting is that they are prioritizing funding, that funding I just mentioned, a lot of it for these 25 areas, and Kentucky has 2. Number 2 on that list of 25 is a collection of 21 counties in eastern Kentucky. Number 6 on that list is a collection of 20 counties in western Kentucky. This is the map. The light blue are the counties that have been identified, those total of 41, and that's also the lines of the area development districts, those demarcation lines, just so you can see sort of how they're parsed out. This is fantastic, right? Amazing federal funding coming down to help us revitalize these areas. But there is a caveat. Most federal grants require a match, right? And you're targeting 25 areas that are already struggling. So they can't come up with 10%, right, to 50% of what maybe the match requires, even more at times. So how do we solve this? What's the solution? We saw other states, in particular neighboring states, creating funds at the state level that could be used for the match for those federal grants. Indiana appropriated $500 million 2 years ago. Ohio appropriated $500 million about a year and a half ago. West Virginia, just about a year ago, a little less, appropriated $250 million. And a state fund that can be used to leverage, the mission being to capture these federal dollars and any other private investment and help these areas, revitalize these areas. So here we are at the grant bill. I went to Representative Heath and Representative Petrie, told them, and we got to work right away in November and started developing House Bill 9. How does it work? So what the process is that any local government, nonprofit or area development district or coalition of those entities can apply to the state for the matching component of a federal grant. How that works is that any of those entities figures out the sort of federal grant opportunity, starts that application, concurrently starts the state match application, submits that to the Department for Local Government. They are developing criteria for which to assess who will get that match. They get it yes or no. If they get the match, then they go on to the federal application process. If they're successful, then Department for Local Government enters into an agreement to release those funds for the match. If they are unsuccessful at the federal level, then those committed funds go back into the pool to be used for other match applications. So that's how it works. We've been working really hard since session. At the request of Chairman Petrie, we've created a working group. Sort of the purpose here is a critical mass of people who are consistently informed and collaborate and share information, opportunities about the grant program, what's going on at the federal level, any workshops for education, any seminars, anything of that nature. We've got representatives from the ads, from the Department of Local Government, universities are involved, our federal contingencies involved, grant professionals, associations of local governments. It's a whole host of people, and it's been really, really wonderful to work in concert with them on this. We meet monthly, a lot of conversations in between, a lot of phone calls in between, but it's been really, really, really productive so far. I can tell you that just next week we have a wonderful program, and we've got on Tuesday our monthly cadence again. Wednesday, we have the ads, the 3 Western Kentucky area development districts are putting on a workshop for House Bill 9 and the grant program. We're bringing down the deputy director of the interworking agency group that I mentioned, as well as other federal officials to inform us more. And it's the website, actually, the energycommunities.gov, the federal website, just put our registration link on yesterday. So I expect that it's going to be really well attended. Thursday, Hannah Conover, who's the executive director for Grant Ready Kentucky, and I will be talking to the Kentucky Nonprofit Network about House Bill 9 and the grant program, giving updates to the nonprofits there. Any nonprofit who is a member or who wants to be a member of the Kentucky Nonprofit Network can attend and listen in. So we've got all the information there if you want to do that. So I'll turn it over to Billy. She can tell you about what's going on with the Department for Local Government, and then the ads can share the list of things that they've identified in their areas.
Thank you. I think everything that Rebecca says, I can echo that. And we do appreciate this body for giving this opportunity for a lot of communities. I think this is a game changer. We know it is. Dealing with the local governments that we do at Department for Local Government, we know that this is going to be a game changer for them. We always have different types of grants through our department that require match funding. So we know how important this is because this has been a deterrent for our local communities. So I think this will be something that will help revitalize these areas and the priorities. An update on what we're doing on our application, as Rebecca said, we're almost completed on the application, but we're still tweaking on the scoring matrix. We want to make sure that it is a simple process. And our main goal too, also as Department for Local Government, along with working with our ads and whatever other entities will be applying through the grant process, is that we educate and continue to educate what's going forward and how to apply for these grants and make it as an easy process as we can. Like I said, we're almost done. We're continued meetings. I think we've got one, like she said, next week, and more coming up at the future. So we're just looking forward to working with everybody and finally getting this nailed down to where we can begin and get some numbers for you all, probably early fall. Oh, here, let me know.
As part of our presentation, I was asked, as Eric was to kind of go through what types of projects we had already in existence without, people coming up with things. Our area is surrounded on 3 sides with water, so our people have been working very diligently, have applications currently already in with the PDIP and the build programs for port facilities along in Hickman, which is in Fulton County, and Ballard County is trying to develop one there at the confluence of the Mississippi and Ohio. And then the Riverport in Paducah has been working diligently to improve their operation and expand to the western part of the county where they have a river facility that has been controlled by the Economic Development Group in Paducah for some years. They're trying to expand it. But in also looking at that, we are also looking at infrastructure issues, because if you set up the operations to have more jobs come to the area, you'll have more people, and you'll have to have places for them to live. You'll have to have infrastructure systems, and we have some nagging issues in some of our communities that have been there that are they're needing to upgrade their water treatment plants, their wastewater treatment plants. I went through the projects that we're working with currently that we know are in the area. Over $196 million worth of projects that are out there. Some of them are new water treatment plants. Some of them are expansions to Riverport facilities to improve. We feel like transportation-wise in the United States, we're in a critical spot where the confluence of the Mississippi and Ohio are, and think that there's a future for us along that river. And that's kind of what we have focused most of our project list toward. every one of the communities in our area are listed on this list that I have in front of me. I can answer questions about specific types of projects, but what we've seen is most of the money that we are chasing, the bigger money, money that would be problematic for our communities to come up with matching funds, is transportation type dollars, because the money is out there. We were with one of the groups last week in D.C., went to Murad's office there at the USDOT, and they were giving us, they named 15 other programs. Have you considered you looking at this? So the money is out there, and it's you say 20% match, but when you're dealing with $20 million, 20% match is pretty hard for a small county to come up with. And the river counties along the Mississippi range from 4,300 in population to 8,000 in population. So you're not talking about a lot of people in that little bit of area. So you don't have a huge tax base which to debt service a long-term commitment like that. So, Eric, you want to go?
Yeah. Yeah, I'm in the same situation as Jeremy is. I'm at the Far East, cover Floyd, Johnson, McGoffin, Martin, and Pike County. As you know, from the last 15 years, the coal industry in Eastern Kentucky has continued to decline and almost non-existent. And with that, a lot of the co-severance dollars that the East were to receive was used a lot for match for other projects. With that revenue stream almost not there anymore, trying to find 20% match, or in some cases, some agencies require up to 50%. It's difficult for some of our communities to come up with that match requirement on projects that are desperately needed. In the East, a lot of our projects are infrastructure, water, sewer. All those properties and the units need to be upgraded, wastewater, water plants. They're aging, some of them as much as 60 to 75 years old, are out of compliance with Clean Water Act, Drinking Water Act. And so those are expensive. When you're trying to build, I was telling Jeremy before, before we came in, we are completing a 3,100 square foot new senior citizen center in Pikeville, Kentucky. And with the supply shortage and increase in material, labor, that 3,100 square foot building is costing $1,980,000 to build. So when you got to come up with a match, just so happened they happen to have enough co-severance to match that CDBG project, and how they were able to free it up was with the influx of ARPA money. But if that ARPA money hadn't been there, this project would not have got done. So a lot of our projects need this match. We've identified, just in water and wastewater projects, we've identified almost $164 million. And a lot of that is upgrading the existing systems. A lot of those water lines and sewer lines that are in place are 60 to 75 years old. They've deteriorated. Leaks, some of our water systems are experiencing as much as 80% water loss just due to the aging infrastructure. A lot of that needs to be replaced, upgraded, like I said, and to meet some of the current regulations that we have now, that they're incapable of doing that. So it would be a big help to have these funds to fund these projects in our area.
And last but certainly not least.
Scoot over more chair.
Let's give him a big chair. No. You can have the big chair.
We're good.
You can take the
All is good. Good morning. So all is well. Good summary, a good overview of what's there. I'm going to try not to repeat too much, but I'm going to try to emphasize a few things. So House Bill 9 has already passed. That's law. The executive order from the presidential executive order that came out in 2021 is out there. That executive order creates that pool of federal grants that are available, fast approaching $1 trillion worth of grants. That's a trillion spelled with a T. $1 trillion worth of grants, near. Broad in scope and applicability. So you'll hear Riverport, you'll hear a complex, you'll hear workforce programs, all kinds of things. And I even hesitate to put labels out there because the possibilities can be broader than what I'm going to say. So what I've been encouraging everyone to do is through their ads, go to energycommunities.gov, go to those type things, get to looking and go through your ads, because it's really who's been tasked through House Bill 9 to look at those things, help identify the possibilities, connect that to local needs, local planning. And on that point, this is not just for how do we make better sidewalks. Sidewalks are great, but it's not just for that. These are things that I would encourage people to think about in these communities. You are either at a second tier preference or a 6th-tier preference in the country for receiving these grants. You may be able to get to things for which you have never been able to even plan that were available to get your community built back up, or your economic part of your community built back up in a way that you've not even been able to think. It's never been on the table. So those grants are large, broad, big dollar figures. We have high preferences in these counties. So we're encouraging people, and that's part of what's going on now, is encouraging people to get started with the ads and help identify these things. See what's real world possibility of it. For those of you that have any connection to the counties that were highlighted previously, those are those high tier preference counties. Now, I will clarify this. At the federal side, anybody can apply for these grants. Private, nonprofit, public, government, there's a lot of different grants out there. That's the federal grant program. Now, House Bill 9 references that grant program, but it's not it. So at the state level, we've hit what's been mentioned here several times. It's great for any particular county, community, or nonprofit in Kentucky to go, hey, there's a set of grants up there near $1 trillion. We've got some really good things we think would be extraordinarily helpful to our communities, but it's a $10 million grant with a 30% match, a 20% match, a 10% match. I mean, it's off the table, forget it, move on. Okay, because we've got such high preference, these things to be so broadly used, then that's where House Bill 9 picks up and goes, we've got some structure of how to get to the grants and how to help and assist and process and identify. But then the most important piece is a pool of money that's set off to the side that can be obligated through DLG with statutory factors to go to the applicants and be their match. So now you have a $10 million application for a federal grant with a 50% match, $5 million. Name me cities and counties in these areas that can come up with that. Yeah. But they're not stopped at that point. If it's a great grant, then you go to DLG. If you meet the statutory criteria, which are not that onerous, we're trying to get the money obligated and get these grants successful, then DLG can obligate that money and you can proceed with your grant. You're successful, the money's there. There is no clawback, there is no payback, there are no strings attached to that. Okay, I'm usually in groups, I have to repeat this 3 times. Okay, this is unique. The grants that are available at the federal level are probably once in a lifetime set of grants. What's been set up through House Bill 9 as far as the pool that can make the applicant match may be unique one time. So I'm encouraging people to take advantage of it. Now, there are going to be several of you on the committee and out listening. Well, I'm not in those counties. But especially in here, you need to think about this. So anytime that we've got a river port, a water issue, or something that we're going to have to adjust and get ready for budget-wise some point, some fashion, and they're in these 41 counties, whatever portion of the federal grant can cover that, it's going to be cheaper than general fund covering it in its entirety, which frees up money for us to look at other counties. So for instance, when someone emailed something the other day about a project, which was a laudable project, something you would normally consider, but my first response was, you are in a county that is designated by federal for these grants, and House Bill 9 has a mechanism to pay your match. The first place you need to go is look at this before talking to A&R about getting general fund money to assist you. Because likely the project that they were talking about would qualify for one of these grants and the match would come through. But that helps free up dollars elsewhere for other people. Now, try to make this the last thing. One thing I tell people, think broad, think deep, think wide-ranging. Don't narrow your possibilities out. Maybe you can get to the next tier of community development, the next tier of economic development. But be careful, because these are one-time monies, which should be thought about for one-time projects. And if you build something or you start a program, those are one-time monies. You are going to have to say, this is something as a community or as an organization that we really prioritize, and we're going to reorient our own budget to support it operationally from then on. The General Assembly is not set up, House Bill 9, to do other than supply the match money on the grant, not to support that project from then on. So be careful in your planning. I try not to narrow it down, but when you're talking to people, think broad, think foundational, think transformational, but also make sure that you have the operational budgeting mechanisms to support it thereafter on your own. Now, last, this is last. Is this the second or third last? All right, so this is last. So why am I and others pushing on this so much when the bill just passed in 2023? Okay, we put in $2 million into the House Bill 9 pool. That's really not intended to meet people's matches. That's an intention of a placeholder. We're serious about it. We're going to be looking at it. Hint, hint, we are looking at it now. And I and others are trying to gauge up input back from the ads and from you and from everybody else to see what things you're identifying at the federal level as possibilities for grant applications. Hopefully they are good quality. Hopefully they are well thought out. If they are, great. We measure what kind of match do we need to be punching for when we hit the 2024 budget cycle. If things aren't necessarily the quality that we're looking for or not well thought out, there may be tweaks to House Bill 9 about the statutory factors of how the money is obligated, okay? But we can't gauge how much money we're going to need to consider putting into that pool unless we have an idea, in my estimation, what the true demand is for that. So you heard Rebecca say something about 200, 400, 500, 600 million in other states. Great, that's other states. I'm looking at everybody in this committee and everybody that's in these counties and anybody that's thinking about these grants. I don't really care about what the other states did. I'm wondering what our people are interested in, what we can take advantage of. That's how we're going to try to gauge what needs to go in that pool over time to take advantage of this thing. Thank you very much.
We're all available for questions, so.
Glad you asked. Representative King, I believe.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you all for being here this morning. A lot of times, federal priorities and values don't exactly line up with Kentucky priorities and values. So I just ask, now that this is in place, I totally support House Bill 9, but please be on your toes and look out for and not obligate Kentucky with drawdown federal dollars. They're going to obligate us to things, as Chair Petrie mentioned, going into the future, obligating us in ways that maybe we wouldn't have chosen on our own. So I thank you for your hard work and thank you for being cautious about whatever stipulations might come with these dollars. Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you. That's a good reminder on your economics professors. There's no such thing as a free lunch.
That's right.
Senator West, I believe, was next.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Just making sure I heard you correctly. If a community wants to match and they don't want to wait, there's nothing holding them back from going ahead and proceeding.
Go for it. And in fact, I should mention, the energycommunities.gov website is a phenomenal resource. Usually it takes about 41 websites for you to actually find that grant opportunity. It's incredibly tedious. That energycommunities.gov that the IWG has created is a clearinghouse. So you can see all the available opportunities. You can drop down, look by housing, look by infrastructure projects, transportation, and so you have a really good understanding. The other thing that I also want to mention, to your point, there are 50 opportunities right now that don't require any matching funds. And so I encourage you to tell your locals to look at that, talk to your ads as well, and any nonprofits you're connected with to examine those and see if any of them might be relevant for your areas.
And even those that have matching requirements, there's nothing that prevents you from moving forward. Again, that grant program with the feds stands on its own. House Bill 9 just assists those that want to pursue it. as well as provide match. But there's nothing prevents it, and from a budgeting standpoint, have at it, spend all of your money that you want to before we get to the state's money.
If it's a construction project, it may be more expensive to wait. But the second question, Mr. Chairman, if that's okay.
Sure.
Of the $1 trillion, have you done any work as far as identifying how much Kentucky could pull down? Is there a cap for Kentucky, or do you know what that number is?
As far as I know, and there is no cap. And so these are what I call quasi-competitive grants. You have to realize when you go back and look at that map, the whole country is not involved in this. There are
Right.
areas that are really involved in it, and we're in a high preference tier. So really no cap, no restriction on that. It's just apply. And it is competitive in the sense of it's not unlimited, but when you talk about near $1 trillion and you're down to 25 essential areas,
It's
Just
pretty
make the
clear we
application.
could pull down $3, $4, $5 billion.
At least, yes.
Yeah.
Mhm.
Okay. All right.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Chair Petrie, I want to follow up on something Senator West asked about if you've got something you want to go ahead and go forward. A lot of the federal issues that I've seen have limitations. You have to start with this if you're going to finish with this. If there's something that's already in the pre-planning or has already through the process to some level, is there any prohibition about, for lack of a better word, converting it into a grant program, kind of running the ideas side by side and merging them somewhere down the line? Is there any prohibition on that?
I don't say there's an explicit prohibition, but the design of House Bill 9 is not set to go back and match thoughts and applications that were in the past. It's really prospective in the way that it looks at it. Gauges that need, gauges that spectrum, tries to figure out what everybody's looking at, and then go put in the right amount of money. This is all a prospective look. Now, is there anything that specifically prohibits it? Not that I can recall. You're going to run into some timing logistics, and then that may or may not be something that's on my list already for statutory modifications as soon as we come back in 2024.
Thank you. Next on the list, Representative McPherson.
Yes, thank you, Chair. How about a time frame? Is there a time frame on this where it could run out? So we've kind of got to act in a.
Sure. We anticipate that a lot of this, and I just want to say, a lot of these programs, federal grant programs, are annual programs, but they've been injected with such significant amounts of funding that we don't anticipate lasting really longer than 2026 to 2027.
Yep. So you can understand other states that Rebecca mentioned earlier are a year and a half ahead of us. So we got started on as fast as we could. Now you understand why we're really beating the bushes about getting demand so we can figure out what dollar figures we need to be considering for the 24 budget so that we can push this stuff along and take full advantage of the limited window of opportunity.
Indiana set aside that $500 million with the same mission. Their structure of their program is very different just because states are different with different institutions and processes. But within a year, they had drawn down $9.86 billion in federal and private investment. And Governor Holcomb said, this has been so successful, we're going to appropriate another $500 million, which they did in April of this year, that became active on July 1st. So Indiana's set aside $1 billion in state funding to go after this type of funding.
Now I'll just point out, their population is different than us.
Yes.
And again, I'm not necessarily looking at what other states have done, but you get an order of magnitude of interest. And if you look at Indiana, how much of their state is highlighted, and they're willing to invest once, twice, with a good return, look how much of our state is involved.
We always
With a
talk
high
about return
preference.
on investment. So
Yes, with a high
21's not
preference.
too bad.
Yep.
thank you. Thank you, Chair.
And thank you, Senator Boswell, I believe.
Good morning. Well, I represent District Number 8, and according to this map, I think it's all in white. I think that may be a good thing, but just for clarification. So if you are a non-designated county that's represented by the light here, you are able, but it's just less likely that you would get the grants. Is that basically what it boils down to?
I think you can make the application, but you're not going to be in a high preference consideration, and you're not eligible for the House Bill 9 badge
Well, we did create the regional application.
unless you're teaming up with someone.
Right, you have to collaborate. So if you want to apply, say Davis, fellow Owensboro, and certainly a lot of jobs in oil and gas. I grew up in that industry. Because it was a metro area, same happened to Henderson, wasn't included on the list. That's why. But if you collaborate with surrounding counties that are included in the list of 41, you could still be up for consideration. But you have to think about sort of the impact there, right? As you go, the probability of success at the federal level when you undertake that effort.
So we've talked about it in terms of if it's a Davis County project, I'm just saying that Ohio is near enough to it that it needs to be an Ohio County project. Someone in there that's making the application that's teaming up with Davis County.
Right.
Along those lines, does it hurt the ranking system for the project if you have a non-qualifying county as part of it, or as long as it's directed through the qualifying county? Is that kind of your point on that, Chairman Petrie? It needs to be led by a qualifying county?
So for instance, at the federal level, those in blue in the east have a second tier preference in the country. Those blue in the west of Kentucky have a 6-tier preference. The ones in the white have no preference. So when you're making your federal application, you would want blue associated with your primary applicant, I would think. Relative to terms of House Bill 9, now there may be some statutory modifications, but the thought process has always been we want to put state general fund money in this pool for obligation to assist where there's the greatest opportunity for return on investment. So there is a definite, there's a qualitative difference between a non-preferenced county making the application or non-preferenced entity, an entity in one of those counties, making that application to ask for state money as opposed to. You have to think, if you have a lot of entities in non-preferenced counties seeking general fund dollars to assist them, then there's a lot less money in the general fund pool to assist those that have second and 6-tier preference. I would hate to cut out some of the blue ones that have the most likelihood of being granted those federal dollars, and not because they couldn't meet the match and the pool wasn't big enough for them.
Thank you. Senator Chambers Armstrong.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And you actually asked my first question I was going to ask about having non-preference counties collaborating. Your answer did bring up another question, which is there any preference given for a larger number of counties applying? So do we think that there is a greater likelihood of a project being funded if, say, 10 counties in Appalachia get together and say, we want to do water treatment issues and water infrastructure, as opposed to those 10 counties applying individually?
So again, I would separate that into federal and state analysis. At the federal level, I don't know. And I would suggest having someone to attend the training session 6 hours long in Murray next Wednesday, or the one that's being scheduled in the east for the same purposes, training session, and see what those federal authorities say. Generally, state government and generally federal government tends to preference larger regional projects that have broader outcomes. And when you look at the executive order and the reasoning behind this program, it thinks and talks in those terms. Likewise, House Bill 9 on the state side is consistent with a lot of our approach over the last few years. There's a lot more kind ear and eye given toward projects that have a regional impact and make sense for economies of scale and impact than siloed projects.
I'll just add to that. We actually had a federal official come down at the county judge executives conference not long ago, and there needs to be more clarity to this, but he certainly said that looking at collaboration, the more impact that you have, the broader in scope in terms of the impact, has a higher likelihood of success. But that's also subject to sort of the particular agency, the type of grant you're going after. So we continue to try to get clarity on that. But I think everybody sort of across the board believes that collaboration is more successful and more deserving maybe of the grant money.
Thank you for that answer. And I'll just note for our local governments listening that perhaps it also reduces the compliance burden on them on the backside with the grant reporting and whatnot. So thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you. I had a follow-up on that, too. I'm starting to, you see a trend line developing here, don't you? What about that imaginary line on a map that separates us from other states? That's really big in my area, so it's kind of personal to me. If we have a project that needs some collaboration or something with a Tennessee county, is it just an extra layer that we have to deal with, or is there an exclusionary issue if Callaway County needs to partner with Henry County, Tennessee, for something. Is that something that can be done? I put you on the spot there on answering a question, but
It is a possibility for discussion as far as House Bill 9 envisioning going outside of the Commonwealth bounds for use for general fund monies. That's never been intended.
I will add, so there are in the Illinois basin, so sorry, not quite in Tennessee yet, but there are what we call rapid response teams that the interworking agency has established. There's 4 in the country right now. They're looking to establish one actually in sort of the eastern portion, kind of East Kentucky, West Virginia area. But the Illinois basin has one. And so they work all together in concert with Indiana, Illinois, Missouri, Kentucky on all those sort of bordering areas to sort of create a little more synergy in terms of going after projects and what's available. So that is something to look for in your domain, I believe.
Not the Tennessee direction, but in the north direction.
Yeah.
Possibly.
Go that route.
thank you. Representative Stalker.
Good morning. My question is to the comment that was made earlier by Representative Petrie about keeping in mind that there will not be future support, that these are one-time allocations of funds, which makes me wonder specifically for our nonprofit organizations, what requirements, if any, will applicants have to meet financially to show the ability to provide funds for future sustainability, if at all?
Good question. As far as statutory factors written into House Bill 9 for consideration of obligation of the general fund match, I'm not sure that we're looking much on operational. This is more of an admonition from Jason Petrie talking about budget. Do not look for future support of projects or programs that you take on through these one-time monies. Does that make sense?
Yes, so if I understand you correctly, folks could still apply knowing that it might at least start a foundational project in those communities.
So for instance, I've had conversations on specific projects where there would be increased operational cost to something that's already going on. But for them to get to the next tier of delivery of services, they need that one-time infusion to get there. And what I've talked with them about is this: do not count on general fund money to support your operational budget needs thereafter. However, if getting to that next tier of support to your constituents is important enough, then you need to go ahead and try to reprioritize your budget to account for that now before it even happens, so that you're ready for it. So if an entity, nonprofit, or even a local government wants to take on a project or a program that fits within one of these grants, fine. If it's going to increase your operational costs, fine. We don't prohibit that. But just as a practical matter, you do have, after you cut the ribbon, you do have to maintain it and support it thereafter. We don't want dying programs, and do not count on general fund money to come to your rescue for it. You need to plan for your own budgets. So I encourage people to get to that next tier. And usually that has increased operational expenses. But you need to make sure you have your budgeting in line to support yourself over time.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you. Anyone else? These are good questions. I appreciate it. Does anyone else have any questions for anyone on the panel? Anything that any of you haven't touched on this that you would like to bring up? Is there any other issue? Please, Chairman Petrie, don't take us too far down some of these rabbit holes.
I have plenty of other issues, but none to be discussed at this moment.
Yeah, we won't go into some of that. Chairman Heath.
I wanted to go back now that we've had a chance to go through this. I have a copy of House Bill 9 with me. It's only 10 pages, but I really encourage you, if you haven't looked at it, to go to page 6 and 7, section 6. And there's a long list of projects. If nothing else, it will get you to thinking about what is possible. This is not all inclusive, but it amazed me the broad brush that was used to paint this with and what all can be used. So don't short yourself. If you're thinking about a project, you're serious about it, fill out the grant, apply for it. Don't be the one who, I guess, cuts your community short. Let the feds tell you, no, your grant doesn't qualify. You don't be the one to make that decision. You know, if you think there's a possibility, go ahead and apply for it, and let the ones who, I guess, screen the applications make those decisions.
All I'll add here is simply that I will go ahead and share the link so that if any of you want to attend next Wednesday out in Murray, that'd be great for the workshop that the ads are putting on there. And also on Thursday, the Kentucky Nonprofit Network, share those with you as well so that you can send those around and potentially attend if you like.
Yeah, thank you, Rebecca. That was what I was going to say to end. I appreciate President Jackson of Murray State for agreeing to host this and doing the legwork for that. I would encourage everyone to come that has any interest in this, just like I would encourage anyone to always come to Murray and Murray State to visit and see what we have going on there. There's my shameless plug for that part. In all seriousness, we appreciate all the hard work you've done. This is a good opportunity for a lot of our Commonwealth, and I know you've done a lot of hard work with this, and we appreciate that, and appreciate all the hard work left to go. This will be something that has a much better opportunity to return things, and we appreciate all of that. Yeah. Thank you.
Thank you.
Next up, we have Commissioner Storm and his contingency coming in to update us on the wonderful Asian carp problem we have in our waterways. If you guys will come up. You're old pros too. Introduce yourself for the committee and begin at your will.
Rich Storm, Commissioner of Kentucky Fish and Wildlife.
Dave Dries, Director of Fisheries.
Chris Woolridge, Director of the Center for Economic and Entrepreneurial Development at Murray State University.
Floor is yours, gentlemen.
All right, I'll kick it off here, and I'll try to be somewhat brief and maybe even jump to like step 10. So you all probably are aware of the challenge we have with invasive carp in Kentucky. And so what we're committed to is a better Kentucky in spite of what we're going to have to deal with Asian carp. So what we could do is we could get a bulldozer, go to state property, dig a big hole, and bury Asian carp. However, what we have done is we've created industry. We've worked with a lot of people. We've gotten to a place where there's a lot of innovative people that want to help us with this problem. For example, we have people that want to use these for lobster bait, and they're doing that. And so they go to the Northeast and take these fish up there. They come back with lobster and sell in the local area. So it's pretty innovative. We also have fertilizer that's been made out of Asian carp. And then we have animal and human grade consumption, which in other parts of the world, a lot of people, this is a big part of their diet. But I'm not sure if any of y'all saw, but we shocked, it was Kentucky or Barkley Lake, a viral video. This thing went around the world, millions and millions of views. And so we're getting a lot of attention here in Kentucky, but I'm proud to say during my tenure, we've removed about 34 million pounds. We have steady markets. We have a lot of fishermen. These commercial fishermen need to be thanked, because if we didn't have them, this is not something we have the resources of a state agency to achieve. And so a lot of these people have invested in Kentucky, quit their jobs, bought boats. They're going out here. They're making a decent living doing this, entire families. And so Dave and I have been on some trips with some of these fishermen. Good, hard-working people, and I really appreciate the fact that they've invested in Kentucky. But another thing I think Dave will touch on, there's a subsidy available, federal dollars, and so this makes it a bit more attractive for these people to come into Kentucky and remove fish. But I'll let Dave, just for the sake of time, give us some history and a quick update. Thank you all.
Thank you, Commissioner, and glad to be with you today, ladies and gentlemen. So what are invasive carp? So invasive carp there's 4 species of carp that are considered in that category of invasive carp that we talk about. There's big head carp, grass carp, black carp, silver carp. Silver carp are the species that get a lot of notoriety because they jump out of the water. They have the potential to injure recreational boaters. They have the potential to interfere with our sport fish populations. And so those are the main reasons why we're really concerned about these invasive carp. And these invasive carp are in the entire Mississippi River Basin. So they're obviously very prominent in the Mississippi River up towards the Great Lakes. You hear a lot about them trying to keep invasive carp out of the Great Lakes. The federal government is, expending billions of dollars to do that. So we in Kentucky have been at the forefront of trying to get federal attention to our efforts here. And since 2013, we've really just gradually ramped up the efforts that we've been doing. These carp got to the Mississippi River by being introduced into ponds in Arkansas to control algae and control algae and wastewater treatment ponds and catfish ponds. And then they got into the Mississippi River, and then they've just gradually expanded. One of the unique things about these species is they need current for their eggs to survive. So, for example, in Kentucky and Barkley Lakes, we don't see them reproducing in there, but they are coming in from downstream, from the Ohio River, they get into the Tennessee River, the Cumberland River, they're in the Kentucky River, and they're gradually continuing to move upstream. So they have a potential to negatively impact over the $3 billion recreational fishing and boating industry in Kentucky. So we sell around 550,000 fishing licenses a year. It's about a $1.2 billion fishing industry, and the boating industry is about $1.9 billion, with 1.2 million boaters in Kentucky. So it has the potential to significantly impact that large industry. So what have we been doing? Since 2013, we started with trying to get more notoriety for the problem and for what we think can be the solution. And really the only solution that's really viable at this point in time is commercial fishing to try to fish these populations down. There's a lot of research going on federally and in various states around the country to try to figure out other means to kind of control these. And that's been helpful information for not only for determining how to control them with other means, but also how to best apply commercial fishing to these fish. In March of 2013, Kentucky Department of Fish and Wildlife hosted Carp Madness, which is the first ever, to our knowledge, commercial fishing tournament. So it was a tournament designed to have commercial fishermen compete for the amount of fish that they could catch. And this was to raise awareness about the problem. It was to show the potential of the commercial fishing industry, and it was also trying to get recreational fishermen to buy in, because there's always been kind of a tension between commercial fishers and recreational fishers. And so that was important. And now we can honestly say that the recreational fishers are appreciative of commercial fishing and their help to control these invasive carp. We've ramped up within our department we now have 10 full-time positions that work with carp. We have 5 positions in Western Kentucky in an office there, and we have 5 positions in Frankfort. And that's a significant part of my division. That's about 10% of my division is devoted to working on carp. And the good news about all that is it's 100% federally funded. And so we've worked, because there's not a match requirement for these funds, we've worked to secure more and more federal funds, and we're doing all this with 100% federal dollars. So the goal of our program is complete eradication of invasive carp. We know that's probably not very likely anytime soon, and so what we can do is we can slow their expansion into new waters, and we can try to put together programs and amend regulations to try to assist the commercial fishermen to fish these populations down where they are present. And we feel like we're making good progress with that, especially in Kentucky and Barkley Lake, which is, as you all know, a very significant part of the tourism industry. And so what we've done is we've applied a 8 cents per pound subsidy on invasive carp harvest in those lakes, and again, all with federal dollars. This program we started is called the Invasive Carp Harvest Program. It also allows fishers into normally restricted waters and use gear that's not normally allowed. And the reason why, we have regulations on what can and can't be used by commercial fishers, because we want to protect, obviously, the non-target species, the sport fish populations. And so what we've done is we've worked with commercial fishers to try to identify special gear that they can use and special areas where they can fish where we know that it wouldn't be a problem. And so we've had staff ride along with commercial fishers to identify those kind of new areas or and new gear. And so we're working with commercial fishers on an experimental commercial fishing program as well. And so that's a program where we have folks ride along, and the commercial fishers that have ideas on ways to catch these carp can test new methods. I hadn't mentioned, but these carp are fairly wily individuals. They're extremely sensitive to noise, and they're very adept at avoiding nets. And so commercial fishermen have had to try to figure out new and innovative ways to be able to catch these things. And I guess the takeaway about our progress is that we're harvesting about 10 million pounds a year. And I say that's Kentucky Department of Fish and Wildlife working with the commercial fishermen through the subsidy program to incentivize that harvest. And since 2013, now that we're halfway through this year, I can say I think you have a chart there. We're probably at about 50 million pounds of carp that has now been harvested statewide since 2013. So that's a lot of fish, and it's a lot of carp that are no longer impacting the resource. So we're trying to support the industry in many ways. We also provide a commercial ice machine for ice, but there's a lot of infrastructure needed to develop the commercial industry, and Kentucky Fish and Wildlife as a resource agency, we feel like we need to stay in our lane of doing resource management, and we don't really feel like it's our area and it's not our expertise to get into the business side and the industry side, as well as the Fish and Wildlife Service funding that we use has very strict requirements on where we can spend those dollars. And so what we've done here recently is I got in touch with Mr. Wooldridge here from Murray State University Center for Entrepreneurial and Economic Development, and we started collaborating and formed this partnership. So when I have folks come to me fairly frequently with new ideas about how they're going to catch carp or how they can do this or do that to reduce these populations, and they always want to know how we can assist them with getting started, with funding or with grants. And certainly that's, not our expertise, and it's not what we're, as a resource agency, that's not what we're adept at. And so it's been good working with Mr. Wooldridge. We recently held a listening session in Livingston. No, we're in Livingston County, Eddyville, Livingston County, and we were there to just listen to fishermen, listen to industry. We invited economic development folks. We invited fishermen. We invited the carp processors. We have about 7 processors currently that are buying fish regularly. Most of those are Kentucky. Some of them are across the border in Tennessee. Some are across the border in Illinois. But in in the interest of time, I'm going to stop there and let Mr. Wooldridge tell you about how he's been helping with this situation, and then we'll be happy to take questions afterwards.
Thank you, Mr. Dreves, and good morning to all. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you, committee members, for having me this morning. Murray State University seeks to create partnerships throughout our region and throughout our state that advance, obviously, our academic and outreach missions, and this is one of those excellent partnerships that Murray State has had for a long time with the Kentucky Department of Fish and Wildlife and our biological and ecological programs, et cetera. And so when Mr. Dreves reached out to me, we, from the College of Business standpoint, stepped into this partnership already on solid ground, already working with long-developed partnerships in other areas. And so this was a natural fit. My role here is, in partnership, is to assist with the business or the market aspect of this. And one of the things that we have seen as a university, and we have worked in this space going on 8 years, working with different clients who have sought either as fishers or as processors in creating business opportunities. One way to address this issue is to create a demand for this fish, for this product. And so while that has kind of been fits and starts, as was mentioned earlier, we have three primary areas where this market is beginning to develop. One in bait, one in fertilizer, and one in consumption, either through livestock or even human consumption. And so our role here is how do we help be that side that comes to his door from working with potential clients, potential businesses. Obviously, if we can create a retail demand, we can create a demand for the processors to work with the fishers to extract this. And as Mr. Dreves mentioned, the total eradication of this is going to be extremely difficult. And so what we hope is a market approach to attempting to reduce and to contain and control this invasive species as much as we can, while also creating a market incentive and creating jobs. Obviously, we have fishers who are out fishing. We have processors who are hiring workforce to process it. And if you've not had the opportunity to see an Asian carp process, I'd be happy to arrange that for you. Once might be enough, but you will see that there are jobs and there are opportunities here to add jobs to our region. And so the idea here is how do we take our experience, how do we take the work that we do as a university in our outreach program, which is what our center does. Our center works with startup and existing business and industry, small businesses, as well as working with our other partners throughout the region and the state and economic development, chambers of commerce, et cetera. And so we bring what resources we have, our faculty, our staff, our resources of our university into these areas. And this is one of those areas where we feel we can collaborate among the colleges in our university, in the communities in which we operate, and hopefully move the needle for that. We've got infrastructure challenges. As Mr. Dreves mentioned, there are infrastructure challenges in any industry, but in this one, we also have a time element. Obviously, frozen fish cannot be frozen indefinitely, and so what market develops over time is going to determine some of what that infrastructure needs to be. We need take-in points, stations, transportation, coolers that Mr. Dreves mentioned, but also encouraging that workforce to work in that fishers area and to work in that processors area. So that's our role here. We have worked with numerous clients and are working with numerous clients now. I will tell you that since the partnership was announced about 6-7 weeks ago, I have had inquiries from literally around the world. I have inquiries from companies who want to look at West Kentucky, and we're providing them with some preliminary information. But these are big-time companies that are considering establishing an operation in West Kentucky for that reason. Now, of course, their questions are infrastructure and et cetera. So we have a lot to work through. But we are not where we were 3 years ago. And I think we're well down the road to addressing this situation, being it is what it is, but converting that to a way that we can have some positive economic impact with job creation, quality of life, and wealth creation. So with that, I'll I'll stop talking and be available for questions. Thank you.
Mr. Chair, may I add a couple of things that we
Always.
left out for sake of time? Thank you. The history behind where did Asian carp come from? Arkansas private ponds that were flooded, and then they went into tributaries, and so that's why we have this problem. And then it's actually great that we followed House Bill 9, other than I think by the crowd clearing out, they thought we were going to get some Asian carp out, I guess, today. But House Bill 9's a great intro to this infrastructure and one-time moves and developing industry around this. And so I think that's a great add-in. But for us, we have one facility where we have a bioacoustic fish fence, so BAF. And when you get into state government, you learn all these acronyms. But a fish fence, which is sound and bubbles. And so we have a need for that in Kentucky to create additional barriers. And it does work. It's proven technology. And so Senator McConnell came to Kentucky, and he helped us establish this first bioacoustic fish fence. And so that's something that we would like to grow. We would like your help with. And you all have helped us tremendously over the years to be the agency that we are. And so if any of you have any questions about the fish fence and potential locations and how we can make that work, it's a serious conversation that needs to be addressed soon. But those are my add-ins, and thank you.
Thank you. Before anybody has any questions, we'll address those. I do have a couple of questions. One, thank you to all of you that have been involved in this space. It's a lot more of a threat than anybody realizes. Conceptually, it's very difficult to look at a carp as invasive or a threat. Anybody that's ever been around water fishing, all your life there's carp. They're the things you don't eat and you just deal with. But this is a completely different animal, literally and figuratively, and the impact it has on the areas that get affected are devastating. That sounds dramatic, but it's not. The economic impact to our area in this already has been problematic, and it could get a lot worse if we don't take these steps. There's a couple of things that I want to address. One, there's law of unintended consequences, especially in an area that's developing. Is there anything from a state level that gets in the way that we need to address? Anything that you see that is on the books that wasn't intended to operate in this space, but kind of does so by default?
I would just say that we're continually looking at our administrative regulations to try to both increase the commercial fishing effectiveness, yet protect the unintended consequences that you mentioned of in this case would be the non-target bycatch, interference with other recreational boating, that sort of thing. So we're continuing to look at our administrative regs, and we recently are working on this experimental fishing methods program that will be coming before Legislative Resource Commission very soon to put that in regulation. So we're just appreciate the support of those changes as we try to modify regulations to make those commercial fishermen more effective.
And I may add as well, geographic limitations. So if you've ever seen an Asian carp at 80, 90 degrees, it does not take long for them to break down. And so these fishermen, we've got ice machines, we've got capabilities to handle this in colder weather, but the geographic limitations, if you're in the western tip and you've got to drive 2 hours, that's a real challenge. And so, again, House Bill 9, maybe some infrastructure in different parts, close to the Ohio River, a little bit more north and a little bit more east could be beneficial.
Thank you. I believe Senator Boswell has a question.
Thank you for your efforts to deal with this. I know it's a serious problem. I fish a lot, and I don't fish as much in the lakes where they jump into the water so much anymore. You mentioned a video, the viral video. Could you give us more information about that real quickly? Is there a website?
I'll tell you what, I will send this committee a link because we actually wanted to post it today, but I think maybe there were some technology difficulties to make that happen. But actually, just like a 5-second video, it's incredible. It went around the world, but we'll send you that link so you can check that out.
Okay. Also, I'm just curious. Is shocking of fish allowed? It's not. I know it's not for game fish, but is shocking for these fish? Is that allowed?
Right now, electrofishing is used by our federal and state resource agencies, but it's not currently allowed for commercial use.
And why not?
And the concerns are just about the non-target species being one, and also the safety issue is two.
Right.
That we feel like that right now that is better left to the folks that have been trained to use it.
It seems like there's a whole new industry of people who are actually taking people out and they're bow fishing to shoot these fish.
Mm-hmm.
I'm not sure if any of those make it to the actual where they are used as a product. But you think that's making any dent in the problem?
It's hard for bow fishing to scale up to the level needed, but it certainly helps. Every little bit helps, and we've actually made it. We changed regulations so bow fishermen can sell their catch of carp, invasive carp only. But normally you can't sell something that's recreationally harvested.
Right.
But we did make that change as well, and got that approved.
Well, my last comment is kind of a catch-22. So you create an industry to deal with, to market these carp, and then you eliminate them, and then you lose your job. So I thank you. I think we're all for, if that's what happens, that's what happens.
We hear that a lot, and I tell people, and we heard a lot about it just in the last presentation about it, House Bill 9. You think of Western Kentucky and being surrounded on three sides by water. You got Barkley and Kentucky lakes, you have the Ohio River, you have the Mississippi River. I think Western Kentucky specifically, good and bad, but they're prime location where these fish are going to be around for a while. I think with the bioacoustic fish fence that we hope to eventually get at both, the current experimental one is at Barkley Lock. We hope to get the other one at Kentucky Lock and Dam. And since they aren't reproducing in the lakes, there is a real possibility that you can put up the fish fences to keep them from migrating into the lakes from downstream, and then use commercial fishing to fish them down. And so that's what we hope to happen on a larger scale. But you can probably imagine that you're gonna fish them down in one location and incentivize harvest there, and then the fishermen are going to want to go somewhere else, and they go somewhere else, and while they're fishing them down over there, the other part, could come back.
Thank you.
Senator Chairman Howe had to step out for a minute, so Senator Wilson had a question or comment.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And I know you talked about the lakes as where you're primarily focused, but they spawn in the rivers and the streams where there is current. Is there any kind of programs for those, the rivers and streams that we're utilizing?
Yes, sir. I did not mention the contract fishing program, which is another program that we have where we're using contract fishing, like literally paying fishermen a per day amount of money to fish for the carp. Because up towards Louisville, we call the Candleton Pool, which is the pool that Louisville is in the McAlpin Pool at McAlpin Lock and Dam, but the pool just below is the Candleton Pool of the Ohio River. And so we use contract fishers to fish in that area, what we call the leading edge, where they're not quite as dense. It's not really a commercially viable density where it attract commercial fishing. So we again, we're using federal funds, but we're paying fishermen to fish down or try to keep those populations down and try to keep them from expanding further upstream with contract fishing.
And then to go off of the senator's comment there, those folks that come into the industry, this economic development of commercial fishing and the processing plants, they understand that our goal is eradication, though that's going to take a very long time if it in fact occurs. Are they made aware of that?
Yeah, they're most certainly aware of that, and we have folks that are very savvy business folks that are running these processing facilities, and they understand that, but they're trying to be nimble and move around and also attract fishermen from a wide area. They just don't buy from fishers that are right in their location. They try to have a system where they can fishermen bring them fish from a wide area.
Okay.
Thank you. May I add to your comments and questions? So we do have people that have established in other states, and for example, we have a group that came into Kentucky, and they were from Illinois, and they've seen this and they've done this before, so they see the economic opportunity and they know the realistic goals. And one of the neat things that I got to do one day was one of these industries came to Kentucky and they had a ribbon cutting, and a few of you may have been there. But Bo Jackson, the sports star from when I was a kid, is an investor in that in both Illinois and Kentucky. And so this is an opportunity, but at the same time, I think a lot of the commercial fishermen like to fish the lakes. For example, if you have a southwest wind, they can go into Northeast Cove for wind protection, and the river with the current and the water levels, it's a little more difficult to navigate. And so we do have river fishermen, but I think we have a lot of preferred fishermen that like to go to the lakes.
If I could just add, in the companies that we're working with, they're doing their own research, and what they've shared with us is their research indicates that running out of fish is not going to be a problem for them. In looking at other countries where this fish is quite prominent, attempts to eradicate them, again, you reach a point where you can't eradicate them much further unless you bring in some other invasive species to consume them or something along those lines. So those industries are taking in the payout rate for asset acquisition, return, and so while I understand the question, I think that we've got an opportunity here to turn something that's going to be a challenge. Looking at really reducing them and containing them and trying to control them is where the market side really comes in. And I think again on the lane that the Fish and Wildlife Department is in, if we attack it from both of those perspectives, that's a very realistic and obtainable goal in a reasonable amount of time.
Well, thank you for your work on this. Appreciate it.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Vice Chair Pfister has a question.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And I want to thank you all for coming in and for what you all have done on this issue. It first came to light for me when these fish were still in the Mississippi River and hadn't gotten here. So I've kind of watched it as it come along, and I really thank you all for being proactive and making lemonade out of an issue that could have been a whole lot worse. But my question is, what I've heard through most of this presentation is about invasive carp. Used to be referred to as Asian carp, and you all gave 4 different species that were a problem. Is this base problem expanding on us, or are they all considered Asian carp, or help me out with this if you could?
Well, these 4 species are, I guess invasive carp is the more politically correct term than Asian carp.
Right.
The federal government started using the invasive carp terminology, and we've just followed suit with that. But we're still talking about the same 4 species: big head carp, silver carp, grass carp, and black carp.
Okay.
So it's the same thing that you've known all along from the Mississippi River.
So the base had grown, isn't expanding?
No.
Okay, thank you.
Representative Hale.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you, Director Dreves and Commissioner, and for your work on this. You mentioned, what was the total amount of pounds that you said
Since 2013, we have harvested 50 million pounds or so. Now that we're halfway through the year, I'm just estimating we've probably got about 5 million pounds harvested this year so far, probably. So that would make 50 million pounds since 2013. And that's statewide. Granted, probably 90+% of that's from Kentucky and Barkley Lakes, but that is a statewide number.
So if I could follow up a couple questions. So when these fishermen sell these, what kind of price do they get?
They're getting around anywhere from 15 to 20 something cents a pound, depending on where they're selling them, depending on whether they're caught from the Ohio River, and also depending on how they have if they've kept them chilled. You know, if they are food grade fish, they're gonna get a lot more money for a food grade fish for human consumption than they will for a fish meal or fertilizer processor. So it really depends on who they're selling them to and what they're buying them for and whether they've been well taken care of or not.
And who are the people that are buying these? Who are the biggest consumers?
So there's a processor that buys them for fish meal and for fertilizer, and then I really couldn't tell you who his customers are. There's a processor that buys them for human consumption. She had a export market to Asia. She has export markets to you probably know better, Middle East. That certainly became a big problem during the pandemic, though. Shipping was a problem. The tariffs that were on exports to China during the Trump administration, those kind of things had a negative effect on that particular industry model. And you know, there's other industry models now that have come about where you can they're processed for bait. So they're frozen and they're literally sliced into chunks like on a meat saw, and then they're packed and then they're shipped to either the Northeast for lobstermen to use as bait. They're also shipped to Florida for crab fishermen to use as bait, and they're shipped to the Gulf of Mexico, Louisiana area for crawfish fishermen to use as bait. So there's several of those bait industry models going on right now. I have people that have called me with all kinds of ideas. They could potentially be used to reclaim metals. The bones could be used to reclaim metals. There's a whole, there's a lot of different ideas out there about ways these could be used. Right now, those are more along the futuristic side, but the bait market and the human consumption, pet food consumption, those are happening now, and fertilizer and fish meals happening at a large scale. And I think that gentleman is looking to expand in Kentucky, and we're hopeful of that. Again, we're interested in the industry because it's a place for these fishermen to sell fish. If there's not an industry, then there's not fishermen willing to fish for them.
Well, thank you for what you're doing. I know it's a huge issue, especially for that part of the state. And if I could just make another comment, I want to thank Fish and Wildlife for their incredible work that they do in this state. This agency does an incredible job for the tourism industry in the state of Kentucky. I know a lot of people don't know this, but I'm a former employee of that department, having given 30 years of my life to working there. And so I know what they do, and I know the impact that the economic impact on this state from what Fish and Wildlife does, and trying to do what they're doing in this situation to eradicate these, and we're not going to eradicate them. I mean, Mr. Dreves wasn't my boss, but I was in the fisheries division for a long time, and I know we're not going to eradicate these. But what you're doing to help that part of the state and the fisheries industry down there. Thank you all for what you're doing, because this state, we have an incredible resource here. If a lot of people maybe listen, watch, and don't know it, an incredible resource at Fish and Wildlife. The possibilities are endless, I think, in the state of Kentucky, and Commissioner Storm is doing a great job. Chairman Howell asked a question. He asked a question a moment ago. What was some of the things that was hindering or could hinder, or the things? And I've worked in this agency for a long time, and for years, going back decades. One of the things that's hindering Fish and Wildlife today is our current administration across the street. This governor has been the most anti-Fish and Wildlife governor for 50 years, doing everything that their administration can to bring down this agency. And I want to go on record by saying this. This commissioner is doing a great job, has come under personal attacks, and I thank this commissioner and this Department of Fish and Wildlife for what they are doing today. And this current administration would like to bring down this department for what reason I don't know. But I go back into the 70s, and every administration from the time I went to work in the 70s has supported Fish and Wildlife 100% and done everything they could to help this agency, to help our state become a better state in our conservation efforts. But this administration has done everything to tear it down, and by the efforts of this commissioner right here, sitting here looking at us today, has stood his ground and kept this agency on solid ground. And I want to say to him and his directors, thank you for what you're doing, and I appreciate it very much. And this agency is going to last a lot longer than us. But we need people in the governor's mansion that will help this agency and work with this agency instead of trying to tear it down. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, gentlemen, for your presentation. Very informative. Just a couple of housekeeping things here before we adjourn. You have a sheet of paper in your folder inviting you to the University of Kentucky Princeton Field Day for the UK corn, soybean, and tobacco field day. So you've got that in your folder if you're interested in attending that. Our next meeting will be Thursday, August 24th, 10 a.m. at the Kentucky State Fair. And you guys that have been around a while are used to meeting us there. Look forward to attending the State Fair. Is there anything we've overlooked before we adjourn? If not, this meeting is adjourned.